Sup guys, today we'll be going over my top tier list for HHN 27 through 29, but we'll get into that right after the intro. So what's up guys, it's Michael from Hallowed Thrills, and today like I said, we will be going over my top tier list from HHN 27 through 29 for the houses for those year's events. Now, I've seen this done by a lot of HHN YouTubers or just theme park YouTubers in general, based on the houses that they enjoyed from 25 through 29. But personally, I can't do that because my first year going was HHN 27. So, I don't really have enough experience to be able to do 25 and 26. So, that's where I'm at for this. This is why we're doing 27 through 29. But nonetheless, you see all the houses that I have down here from those years. We have the S tier, A tier, B tier, C tier, and D tier, S being the highest and D being the lowest. So let's get into it. So we're going to start off with American Horror Story Volume 2. Now this house was in HHN 27, which was my first year. Now I have not seen the earlier seasons of American Horror Story. But I have started watching the most recent season of it. But for me, this house was not that great. I enjoyed parts of it, but I just don't really follow the series, so I didn't enjoy it as much as I thought I should have. So it's going to go in C tier. Next, we have Ash vs. Evil Dead. I did not enjoy this house. I enjoyed the stuff that was out, like the facade of the house. I enjoyed that, but the house itself left a little to be desired. It was just not my favorite house of that year. Did not see this like this movie in general, so I'm not just a big fan of the series in general, which may sway me to put it down here, but that's where it's going to go. It's going to go in D tier for me, just I didn't enjoy the house. Now next up, we're going to do the Horrors of Blumhouse, the first rendition of it, which was with Insidious, Sinister, and Purge. Now I enjoyed this version of the Horrors of Blumhouse. It was a fantastic house. And personally for me, it was a very good house at HHN 27. Now most people might not agree with that, but personally I enjoyed it. The back half of the house was relatively scary. There were so many scares left and right all over the place. It was a good house. But on the other hand, the next house being the Horrors of Blumhouse with Happy Death Day and the first Purge, this house was garbage. No way around it. Terrible house. Scares were terrible. The first Purge section of it was terrible. Just garbage in general. Let's move on. Next we have Carnival Graveyard. Absolutely love this house. Fantastic theming. There were so many nods back to past years, and it was just a great house in general. Loved the scares in it. It goes in A. House of a Thousand Corpses. They absolutely killed this house. It is by far my favorite house that has been in the Men in Black tent. It follows the video so well. Fish Boy in there. 10 out of 10. It's gonna go in A for me. Scarecrow the Reaping. So now this one was one of the only houses that I did not get to go through at HHN 27, but I have watched enough videos and done enough research on this house to realize that this by far is the best house that was at that event, and I'm so upset that I missed it. And just for that, it's going in the S tier. It's a fantastic house. Now moving on. Dead Exposure. Dead Exposure was an okay house. It had a lot of good scares, but my only downside to it was that the reason that the scares were so good is the strobe lights. Take the strobe lights out of that house, and that house was terrible. And I did not enjoy the strobe lights. It just was not... I could not fully enjoy the house. So it's gonna go B tier for me. I just think the scares were good, but it just was not my favorite house of that year. Now, Depths of Fear was probably one of my most hyped original houses heading into last year, and it fell so flat for me. The scares were so-so, the theming was so-so, it was just, everything was just a bit underwhelming for what I had hyped up for it. So it goes in C tier. The Fallen from HHN 27. The Fallen had some good scares. The bungee scares were great. The section where you went around the one spire in a circle and had scares coming from both sides was fantastic. But it was probably one of my least favorite houses. Well, it was definitely my least favorite original that year. Well, no, we'll get into that. But it just was not very memorable for me. So it's going to go in C tier. Ghostbusters from last year. Ghostbusters, very scenic house, had a lot of good scenes from the movie that nodded back to it. I enjoyed it, but it does not go any higher than B. Sorry. Graveyard Games. My favorite house of last year. Had great theming, great aesthetics, great scares. Nothing else can be said about it. It goes in S tier. Fantastic house. Next up we have Halloween 4. Halloween 4. I love the Halloween franchise. I love Michael Myers. This was a very disappointing house. Nothing else I can say about it. It goes to C. It's not terrible, but it's not great. Hive, though. Remember how I said about how I thought The Fallen was my least favorite original from that year? No. This house is by far my least favorite. The scares were terrible. The theming was terrible. I did not enjoy this house whatsoever. Did not get a single scare through this house. I pretty much went through it by myself and did not get a single scare. This house was terrible. Moving on. Killer Clowns from Outer Space, though, from last year. Loved the house. Followed the movie so well. The clowns looked great. The music was great. The smells were great. Just everything about this house really immersed you in the theming of it. It goes in A. It's fantastic. Nightingale's Blood Pit, original from last year, is borderline S tier for me. I had a lot of good runs through it, but there were some that were not so good. That's why it goes in A. Now, Poltergeist, I went through it a couple times at HHN 28. It followed the movie very well. There were a lot of good scares in it. It was a very creepy kind of house, but I did not get a lot of good run through. The few run throughs that I got were not the best, but the theming of it was okay. I'm gonna have to put it in B just because I didn't really get the best run throughs of it. Saw, the Games of Jigsaw. I waited a really long time for this house at HHN 27 when I went, and it did not meet expectations for me. It's going right there, C. C is looking like the tier of things that didn't reach my expectations. But Seeds of Extinction, which is our next house, was my favorite house from HHN 28. The theming of it was great. I loved the whole story behind it. The scare actors had great scares. This was a great house because it just really, you could not tell where scares were coming from, and I loved it. It gets the S tier for me. It was fantastic. The Shining was a very good house, had some great scares, followed the movie as true as it possibly could, and similar to Ghostbusters, if you liked the movie, you would have liked the house. It's gonna go B tier for me. It was not, there wasn't enough of it to get to A. Slaughter Cinema from HHN 28 was fantastic. I love the B films. It was great. There's not much else I can say about this house because it was so good. I really hope they do a second version of it because I want to see what else they can pull out for B roll movies. I loved it. It's going in tier A. Stranger Things. The first rendition of Stranger Things from HHN 28. I love the house, had great scares, the Demogorgons looked fantastic, it followed the first season very well. It goes B tier. But now we move on to Stranger Things 2 that covered seasons 2 and 3. This house was terrible. My least favorite house from HHN 29. It is a terrible house. They could have done so much better with it. It's going D tier. I did not like that house whatsoever. There were a few cool things from it, but they could have done so much better with that house. Now, we go on to Scary Tales. Scary Tales was my least hyped house from 28. And honestly, it turned out pretty well. I really enjoyed going through this house. The facade of the house looked great. The witch that was flying over top of people looked great. The Three Bears section of it was fantastic. Hansel and Gretel was fantastic. It's gonna go B tier for me. It didn't have the scares that could get into A tier, but the theming of it is good enough to get it to B tier for me. Now, Trick or Treat. Trick or Treat, I love the movie. Love just everything about the house itself. The section with the quarry really immersed you in the fact that you were down there, and you could really tell that that's where you were if you went and watched the movie. Once again, though, falls in that same category with The Shining and Ghostbusters. You had to have seen the movie to really enjoy it. Now, Universal Monsters was my favorite IP from last year. And it goes hand in hand with Graveyard Games for being my favorite house from that year. So it is going to be the first IP that reaches in and gets on to the S tier. Fantastic house. Now we only got 3 left here. We're moving on to Us. Us, when the event started, it was C tier all the way for me. It was a decent house, but very disappointing. I went through it more times. I actually saw the movie, and it's just barely sneaks into B tier for me. You had to have seen the movie to understand the house, and it was just a great house in general. Now, we will move on to the last 2. Dead Waters. If you follow me on Instagram and Twitter, and you have seen my comments on other HHN community members' posts, you have definitely seen that I have been praising this house non-stop as my favorite house of all time. I love this house, I love the theming, I love the scares, I love the scare actors, I love the costuming. This house ticked all the boxes for me, and there has yet to be a house that does better than this. I loved it. It's the top of the list for me. If there was something higher than God tier, it would go there and be a standalone star. Now our last house is Yeti. Yeti was a fantastic house. Had the greatest theme, one of the best theming of the event. It really immersed you into the fact that you were in a snowy tundra. The Yetis looked great. The scares were great. My favorite scare being the chest burst, where the Yeti stuck his hand through the guy's chest. It was so fantastic. It got me every time that I went through it. It goes in A tier as the last house. So there we go. That is my list for HHN 27 through 29. We have S tier, A tier, B tier, C tier, D tier. These are just terrible and should be thrown away. If you agree with my list, or if you disagree, let me know what you think. Put it in the comments below. Make sure you like and subscribe. Make sure you hit the bell notification icon to get notified whenever I post a video. But as always, I've been Michael, and this has been Hollowed Thrills, and I'll see you guys next time.